to this, making you a host. Good morning, good afternoon, folks, everyone. Welcome to the Saturday event. It's one of many events. It's the series of large-scale Scrum of New York City, the largest, the fastest growing, and the most active, probably globally, last meetup. Today we have a very special guest, and I am pleased to introduce him. I'll just give the bare minimum, and he will be able to give extras as he goes. The gentleman's name is Chris Roan. He's the guest speaker today. Very honorable person, as far as I can tell, based on his career. He has been decorated by the country of the U.S. He's the former Navy servant, has been deployed to various hotspots, as we call them, over the globe, has served the country, has a lot of experience work-wise, has spent 17 plus years in financial industry. Specifically, he works for a very large investment bank. He can probably tell you exactly what name. I usually obscure names unless the speaker wishes to share. Has been an engineer, developer, architect, manager, and turned his career over to adaptive ways of working over decades of doing the more traditional work. So he's been a Scrum Master, Scrum product owner, and has been doing lots of agile, adaptive, authentic, I would say, because I've seen them in action, true leadership in the space. So he's from financial banking today, and as I'm sure you know, in investment banking, and as I'm sure you know, in financial space, in investment banking, changing organizational dynamics is pretty hard, pretty rough. So Chris Roan will tell us what he knows, what he feels needs to be shared. Today's topic specifically will be around leadership, and the position he comes from, Chris comes from, that there were really no bad teams, no bad Scrum teams, but mostly this is caused by bad leadership. So if there is any badness, any dysfunctions or omissions we see, it is because of poor leadership. And he will take us through some of his personal examples or cases that he has been facing over years. I will stop belaboring and I'll just pass the baton over to where it belongs. Chris, thank you again for coming out and doing this for us. The floor is yours. You can share the screen and you can take questions as you see fit. Folks, please keep your mics off, cameras on if you can, and I'll be monitoring the chat just in case if you have something there. But best of all, just raise your hand and ask a question, okay? Chris,
cool. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Well, thanks, Gene. That was great. Very humbled by the kind remarks, and welcome everybody. Good to see you and talk, and hopefully hear from most of you today. I'm very humbled and appreciative that you guys are wasting your time with me today on a Saturday afternoon away from your family and friends. I'll try to hopefully provide a little value just by sharing my experiences, and primarily what hasn't worked well. I learned from failures more than successes, and hopefully I can provide you guys a little bit of insights into what hasn't worked for me, what it really has worked as well. But the constant journey of failure, though, is really what this is, and around my own personal leadership experience, and taking ownership, what I call extreme ownership. And I'll walk you guys through that concept as well. But like Gene said, I work for a large financial firm. It's rhymes with L's Argo, and I'm sure you can figure that out where I work. And it's not top secret. Obviously, can't disclose some of the specific details of some of the activities and groups and programs that I've worked with, but I'll try to be hopefully specific enough that it provides some context and some value that you can take back and help you apply this, maybe, or look out for certain trends or themes in your own world, your own experiences with your own team or workplace, or even just something to look out for in the future. But like Gene said, I come from a ranch in Wyoming, a rural place up in Wyoming. I left for the military right after high school, and served primarily overseas, a lot in Europe and multiple different theaters of war, where I learned a lot about leadership very fast. There's a lot of great stories there. The funny story is, though, I think I probably still hold the record for the most expensive pizza ever purchased by the United States government. So I was off the coast of North Carolina, and this is about problem solving, right? Thinking outside the box. But we were on a ship that was about 50 miles outside the coast of North Carolina, and we're running out of food. We're trying to get these new planes, these V-22 Ospreys, ready for sea, and they're all broken. And a friend of mine was the helicopter pilot, CH-43, which is the dual blade helicopter, and he's the one that runs parts and people back and consultants back to the base. And I was like, man, are you gonna go back to base soon? He's like, no, we're complaining about the food, eating boiled chicken for breakfast. I'm like, I got an idea. And like, can you make a flight op to North Carolina? He's like, yeah, I can go back. What do you need? I said, hold on. Picked my satellite phone up and I called Domino's and I ordered, 10 extra large pizzas for my team and I. And he's like, I need a computer for my shop up here when we deploy. I'm like, I know the people that know how to do that. So let me help you get a new computer while you go get me my pizza. So he flew and got some pizza and came back and it was still warm. And the team was shocked. They're like, where'd you get pizza? We're in like the middle of the ocean here. This is so that was a great experience. Just learning and thinking outside the box with those folks. Gene's got this was a inclusion and diversity slide that I had to put together for inside my company when I got asked to kind of speak about me and what my brand is, and Chris. So this is kind of my kind of background. Navy for about 8 years, Wells Fargo for about 17 going now, like Gene mentioned. I'm a avid nerd. I love science, space. I'm a massive Star Wars nerd. So if you ever want to geek out about that, let me know. Got a 13-year-old boy right there. My dog I thought was a black lab, but it isn't a black lab. I did the DNA testing and found out she's actually a Dalmatian and a German Shepherd, not a black lab. So go figure that out. And so I still love to skydive. I love to do all kinds of great outdoors activities, avid athletics, competitive sports. I still love doing that, keeping my brain sharp by working out the body. And there's a photo of my family down the bottom right corner. It's us when I was taking the first photo of the eclipse that happened. It was my first experience doing astrophotography with eclipse, and so that's us setting up my gear and inviting the family out because the totality line of the eclipse went right over my family's ranch in Wyoming. So that's all of us experiencing that. But like Gene said, I've been doing Scrum and Agile for better part of about 9-10 years. I spent about a decade in technology here at the company as a developer, .NET developer, engineer. One of my claim to fame is bringing in server virtualization VMware, if you guys know what VMware is, and SharePoint back in legacy Wells Fargo before we bought Wachovia. That was a great experience. But really what got me into it though was I met this guy named Richard Hunthausen about a decade ago from scrum.org, and we were trying to do faster development and better development with our app teams. And he was helping me set up TFS, Team Foundation Server, Microsoft. And he said, well, hey, I think you guys should probably use Scrum. Let me help you out with this. I'm like, yeah, I've read it. I've seen it. I've read the Agile Manifesto. But I don't know how it's going to work here at Wells Fargo, right? We've got a lot of policy, a lot of processes, a lot of complexity. It's a regulatory bank. So we started experimenting, right, on how to do this. And so that's been kind of my journey for the last 9-10 years of the company, was just perfecting that. And one thing I've learned about, and what I'll talk about today, and hopefully if you guys have read this book or not, called Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin. But one thing I learned very quickly through my journey is that the leadership aspect of deploying Scrum, professional Scrum, is so critical. It's so vital to the success of your team and you and your customer mainly, right? Whoever you're supposed to be supporting, because that's really what Scrum is about. And I realized really quickly that I needed to figure out a different way to fix myself as the leader of the team. At the time, I was a product owner trying to get these teams together and to deploy a new innovative approach for our regulators and for our company. And it just wasn't working. And I kept blaming others. I kept blaming processes, policy, other groups, other people. And I finally was like, I had to go back to my core, my roots and my military background. And that's when I, through a mutual friend of mine who was from what's called SEAL Team DevGru, what they used to call SEAL Team 6. He's like, hey man, you should check out this guy's book. We were with him over in Ramadi in Iraq. And so I've read the book a couple of times, like, okay, this is like, it clicked. I was like, wait a minute, there's a linkage here between Scrum, and the problem I'm having, which is how am I effectively, not leading this team, and what do I need to change about myself. Let me share my screen too real quick, and I'll show you guys kind of just a couple little bullet points I put together for you guys. But obviously, the Scrum values, this is kind of what I, when harping on with my team, and walking through trying to train leaders on as we were trying to do this years ago. And this is around like 2014, 2015. I was in charge of building out a regulatory program for the company to deploy the first ever business process risk management program of mapping high risk business processes and annotating our risks and our controls to prove to the government that we know what we're doing. We're documenting those processes, and we're uncovering risks, and we're implementing controls and monitoring activities. So we needed a program to do this. And so I built out the entire program under Agile with Scrum. And I asked my leaders, I said, would you trust me to go on a journey and experiment to deploy the entire program under Scrum? And they had no idea. Like 98.2% of the people involved in this entire process had no idea about what Scrum was, what Agile was. And this is obviously during the time frame where it was very focused on waterfall activities, elongated journeys around development, testing, deployment, implementation, integration, just name it, right? Whether it's software and non-software, right? And so I said, let's go on, just trust me to go on this journey if you're going to make me the leader of this team to implement all of these capabilities for the regulators and for our internal stakeholders. I think this makes the most sense, right? Because it's chaos right now. It's a little disjointed. There's not a real focus on, I think, what the plan should be or what the goal should be. So I think this would help anchor us, right? Because obviously the Scrum values you see here on the screen, if you guys are, obviously, I'm assuming most of you guys are familiar with the Scrum values, but this is, how are we going to make this company more proficient? How are we going to make our teams more proficient? How are we going to achieve these goals that were being set by our leaders and our regulators, and how we're going to commit and support each other in doing that, right? And how to get the best possible outcome or progress quickly, because that was the big thing. The regulators were losing patience. I'm sure you've seen us on the news quite a bit recently and in the past. So we had a reputation thing to do. We had a problem to help solve for, which was how to make the company better, how to improve and provide accountable evidence, credible evidence to our regulators and our shareholders, basically, how to prove to them that we're improving our risk processes and our internal organization around delivering services to our customers. So we had to develop a culture and a program around openness, right? Around transparency, around how we can identify challenges quickly, because we're taking new regulations that are being developed very quickly, and then have to implement those and provide evidence back to the regulators that we're saying what we're telling them what we're doing, or proving it. And so I would focus heavily on these values at first, but I realized in the first year and a half, it just wasn't working, right? We had significant challenges with it being too fast. It's too transparent. And I remember meeting with the regulators in San Francisco and trying to explain this approach to them, trying to show them that, hey, this is empiricism. We're trying to be transparent. It gives you guys the ability to inspect and adapt. And they just, I'm up there, picture me clean shaven, suit and tie on, and they're just not hearing it. Like, they're interrupting. I'm a big body language person. They're, I call them pretzel face people. They got their, arms like this, and that my leaders are interrupting me, constantly just restating what I'm stating. The sky's blue. Well, what Chris means is the sky's really blue. I thought I just said that, right? So I'm just trying to figure out, how do I get through to these folks? I'm trying to really show them that the Scrum process, or an empirical control framework, is I think the right approach to take, and it just wasn't working for them. Then I quickly read this book, Extreme Ownership, and went through the principles that it talks about in Extreme Ownership, and I realized, wait a minute, I'm the leader. I gotta stop blaming everybody else. I gotta take responsibility for this. And I realized real quickly that my ego was getting in the way, and my own interpretation of what I thought the problem was, which was everybody else, was wrong. It was me was the problem. So I said, let me do a little experiment of myself to see how I can check myself and how to get reset based on what I'll talk about, these principles of extreme ownership go through. So what I did was I said, I got to present back to these folks again every month, but I'm going to wait. I'm going to grow this beard out. I'm going to try to change something about myself to have a better positive impact on these people that are significantly more senior than me, that have been doing this for decades more than I have. But I'm the accountable leader they're propping up as the person that's going to be held responsible if this thing goes sideways. And so there's a lot of pressure. So I figured I need to figure out a way to change me. So I was like, let me grow this beard out. I purposely didn't wear a tie the next session. I got some prescription glasses, and I'm 20/20 vision, but I still got some prescription computer glasses. And I was like, let me go do this, because if I don't, I'm going to look like the 19-year-old Mormon missionary like I did before. So I grew this out and I presented literally the exact same content, just with updated data and information. And I was completely shocked based on how I changed my attitude by deploying these principles and the physical appearance change that I made of myself. It was a 180-degree difference. Everybody was very attentive. They were leaning in. They weren't interrupting me anymore. And when I got done, it was like applause. I felt like I just presented like, some massive new innovation to a crowd of people, like Steve Jobs introducing the new iPhone. I couldn't believe it. I was like, what just happened? Nothing changed except for me. And what I changed, none of these people changed. They're still the same people. And I realized quickly that maybe this is something I need to focus on, how to now fine tune with my teams across, the areas that we're trying to be accountable for introducing this program and this new innovation, this new tool that we invented. And so I quickly went back to my team and I changed the entire dynamic of how I was leading this team. Whereas a product owner before, very authoritative, very command and control. I wasn't trusting in the team to, be self-sufficient. I wasn't really, believing in them that they could do this. I was very impatient in the very beginning. And so I said, let me figure out a way how I'm going to admit the failure first. I'm going to take accountability and ownership of what hasn't worked in the beginning. We were on 2-week sprints for the first year. We clearly were deploying to production fast, but at the end of the day, though, the people that we needed to use the solution and the program and the policy were just resisting and fighting, and this wasn't working. So I first started, that first principle of extreme ownership talks about there's no bad teams, only bad leaders. And I was like, how does this relate to the Scrum values? Like, well, it's, Scrum talks about managers are optional in Scrum. Trust and courage is the key, pinnacles and foundational components of Scrum. So I was like, well, let me hold people accountable, but first let me hold myself accountable in front of the team. Let me make sure that I'm setting these high standards for myself first as a leader of the team, the product owner, and as the program leader for these other, areas of the program. And I immediately deployed and set up what I called Knights of the Round Table with my teams, my Scrum teams. I said, hey, I'm going to roll my sleeves up. I'm not going to just be your product owner who comes in and just delegates epics and features and stories to you all. I'm going to take accountability. I'm going to work on some of these now. I'm going to, actively show you on decompositioning and refining these items daily. Whereas before, my ego was getting in the way, and I just assumed these smarter people than me would just understand what I was trying to convey in all these stories. I would refine it in the beginning and go get busy with a bunch of other meetings, and I would come to the end of the sprint review and expecting amazing things to happen and be shocked that there wasn't a lot of value being delivered. The team wasn't working well together, lots of distrust, lots of discerning and discord happening. And I would blame them. And I realized, wait a minute, it was me. I wasn't engaging with them on a regular basis. So I set that high standard for myself first. And I actively, made sure they saw me working with them as a servant leader, not as a authoritative micromanager, as a product owner. So I was very honest with them. I would do an honest assessment about myself first, then ask them to maybe do an assessment of themselves, really support them on, where their weaknesses were. And some of them were, as Scrum talks about developing the T person, some of them were about, hey, I'm struggling with, I'm not really a good tester, so I'm just going to fall back on what's comfortable. So I had to help provide an environment for their own self-experimentation and make sure I don't hold them to the same level of standards as a senior, tester or a senior developer if they're trying to pair program or maybe express their soft skills better, maybe focus on an area that they're not very deep and narrow strong in. So I had to change that and come up with a better plan, like training even, provide them better opportunities, even have better capacity and open capacity during the sprint to go do self-experimentation, go do their own training, not treat them like gold, oil, titanium resources, but treat them as people, as assets. So I would dial back their capacity, say, hey, why don't you spend 5 hours daily focused on the sprint backlog and use the extra 3 hours to go do that self-experimentation. Go do training. We'll help set up, targeted training. Go create your own invention. Go explore an area that you really want to focus on to help the team. So I would change that mindset and then help set specific focus goals for them throughout the sprint. And then believe is the number 2 principle that the Scrum Ownership talks about. And it's, they have to see that I believed in this mission. Whereas before, my body language and my statements weren't very, I think, set up in a place where they would see that I'm truly believing in this concept that we're trying to deploy. And so I had to really reshape my own, thought process, the way I spoke, and be authentic and be honest, where they saw that I actually believed this. I wasn't just regurgitating some corporate speak from some automatic word generator. And I was actually proving to them that I'm genuine, and I have good intent, and I really believe in this mission. And I had to, show them that I want them to be able to accomplish the same mission. And one thing I would remind them of was that when, at the end of the day, when it would go sideways, I'm going to be the one to go tell the leaders that it's my fault. I'm accountable. I'm going to own this. But if it went amazing and it got a lot of good fanfare, I don't want the recognition. I told them, I remind the team, I was like, I got plenty of those t-shirts in my closet. I don't need those medals. I don't need that recognition anymore. I want you to get the recognition. I'm going to prop you up, because at the end of the day, my goal is long-term, hopefully make them professional senior folks in Scrum and Agile to go pass on the same learnings. It's the Shuha-Re concept that, I don't know if you guys have ever heard that before, the state of mastering enlightenment and mastering knowledge and confidence, going from the student to the teacher. That was my main objective and goal, to help show them I'm truly believing not only in the mission, but I believe in them, right? As a cross-functional team, trying to support them to be self-management, self-organizing, like the Knights of the Round Table concept I brought up earlier. And then be really transparent. I mean, one thing that was very clear to me early on with other peer managers of mine and leaders was the threat of being too transparent with your team. I started seeing that was not really supported early on, right? It was the old 19th century way of management, which is treating everything like a top secret clearance, confidential, state secret or federal secret or government secret, even as something as simple as what's not working in the organization. So I made sure that the team saw that as part of that believing in the mission and them, that I was authentic and transparent with them. I would tell them, hey, this isn't working, and this is what the leadership passed down to me. I wasn't going to hold on to that as if it's some currency that's going to make me better as a manager, but I wanted them to see that I was trying to be a better leader, first by bringing them along the journey as well, and sharing with them that what I'm struggling with from a leadership perspective with people I have no control over, right? So transparency was the key thing. And that's where the trust and the focus comes in, and how that links back to the Scrum values. Next is check the ego. This was a big one for me, definitely for my peers as well, where that takes courage to do this, right? And this is really hard, especially in a company of 300,000 employees, lots of egos, right? Lots of competitiveness. It's very stressful in certain groups, and I'm sure you guys have seen it as well. So it took a lot of courage for myself to look in my mirror, and I call it my accountability mirror, to check my own ego. Right, it was very hard to me, because I'm an engineer developer by passion and trade and training, and developers and engineers are very egotistical, right? I'll admit that. I mean, I've worked with a lot of great friends of mine that have a lot of great egos, right? And it's very hard to work with them. That's just the nature of the job of the profession I'm in, and I'm sure some of you have seen or been experiencing as well. So I said, I need to have some respect in my for myself to make this courageous decision to switch and check my own ego, and hopefully others would see the same respect in return and reciprocate that to me by checking my ego, and then having that commitment to follow through with it, right? So the humility to admit my own mistakes was a huge one, and then but come to the team and develop a plan of how to overcome those was super key, essential to, I think, successful of our team over time, was just constantly admitting to them, hey, I came to this idea, I wrote this user story, this feature, this epic. It was the best I knew at the time. It was based on the information I had at the time. It wasn't the right approach. And the team at first would see that as waste. And the goal of Scrum, as you guys know, is to eliminate waste, reduce dependencies. And at the end of the day, if I'm the cause of those wasteful items or dependencies, then I need to admit to those mistakes and hopefully learn from those and move on and don't repeat them, right? And so I also want to make sure the team saw from a check my ego perspective that I'm not doing this to drive my own personal ambition or career growth. I don't have my own personal agenda to be the next CIO or CTO or executive. That's not I don't check my own selfish wants and my own needs and desires. And I want them to see that I'm 100% laser focused on this mission that we have with the regulators in our company and this new concept of our program and what we're inventing. So that took a lot of courage, and I had to, just own up to those mistakes and then move forward with them and develop that plan. One of those, a good story of recently that just happened to me, was trying to transform an operations organization, right? A group of folks that were very heavily regulatory, risk compliance, audit type of, mentality, and trying to show them how they need to transform to use Agile and Scrum. And that was one of my own failures of trying to quickly implement Scrum and Agile across groups that just simply they couldn't make the connection, right? And I knew that it's going to be a long journey. It's going to take some time and perseverance and patience before the existing folks or maybe new leaders that show up to comprehend and understand what it means to implement Scrum and Agile in a very complicated, heavily operational regulatory space. And I realized that my approach then was maybe too aggressive, maybe too command and control, maybe too direct. And I just need to back off the gas a little bit and realize I need to maybe let it run its course for a few cycles. And hopefully that the right seeds that I planted that continue to help foster, grow that, water those seeds, and then hopefully in a couple of years in time that'll happen. And that's what I think the real epiphany moment for me with that failure was the setting too high of standard, too aggressive of goals, short-term or long-term goals on that transformation, and just stepping back and realizing that in some cases you just need to, it's going to take some time, right? And I just have to realize that. So that was an example of how I had to help, again, continue to remind myself to check my ego, even at doing like an Agile transformation across a very large, complex space with thousands, tens of thousands of people, and lots of leaders that, as you know, with less, if you got the experience or training less, or even with Nexus, that if leaders start realizing that it's going to mean descaling their organization currently, it's going to mean changing their current structure from a very, number of middle managers and teams to flattening that organization. And so that means that some people are going to be very defensive and resistant to that because they realize that might mean their job is impacted, right? So a lot of safety, a lot of psychological safety, or internal corporate challenge to that, because people see that as a threat to their organization or their team or their own job survivability, right? So that was one where I just had to be humble about that and not get too over egotistical about that approach, and just hopefully move on. And I planted the right seeds, and that it takes root eventually, right? So that was a good experience recently for me on how I had to help continue to remind myself to check my ego at that approach. And the other one is that they talk about in extreme ownership is simplicity, or just keep it simple. And obviously, as you guys know, the Scrum framework is about, it's very simple to understand. It's 10 pages. If you remove the first page and the last page, it's 10 pages. It's a very simple framework, very lightweight process control framework. But if you know what they always talk about, if you hear from Rich or even Gene or others, it's extremely difficult to implement, right? It's extremely difficult to be successful with that because of just the nature of people, right? And processes and organizational dynamics and constructs and outside influences and dependencies. So with extreme ownership, it talks about, the mission, the plan, the objectives, how to communicate very clear and concisely and keep it simple, right? And so that goes back to the Knights of the Round Table approach of the team, of being open, allowing the team to ask questions, allow the team to challenge or critically challenge even my own objective. If the product goal, if I said it is this, allow the team to challenge that, right? I recognize I had a lot of people that were extremely way more intelligent, smarter than me. And I had to give them that opportunity to feel comfortable to challenge even what I'm saying. And that was one thing I realized early on, that being the product owner and not realizing why are these my team not challenging this? Why are they waiting to the 9th and 11th hour when it would fail? And I'm like, guys, like, if you realize this wasn't going to work, why didn't you feel like you could challenge it? And I realized very quickly that a lot of the folks on my Scrum team also directly reported to me from an HR perspective. So that openness that Scrum talks about around this, keep it simple, that extreme ownership is around allowing people to ask questions and incredibly challenge. I realized just by the sheer nature of the fact that they reported to me, I wasn't creating that conducive, open environment. So I again, back to check my own ego, I said I needed to reorg my team and some of my folks and move them out from under me to other HR type of people managers. And, and I realized, the perception would be, I'm losing people, I'm losing currency of a manager because I don't have that many direct reports anymore. I realized that wasn't important. That wasn't part of my plan. My plan was I needed to figure out a way to create an open environment for what Scrum talks about, allow them to inspect, adapt, be open and transparent, and have that courage to challenge even me as their leader and product owner. And once I did that, that was a huge successful opportunity that then changed the team dynamics. And when I started to scale the Scrum teams later and hiring product owners for various products, I kind of, I realized I can't have this team report to the actual product owner. So I had to make sure that if anybody member of that Scrum team, that product owner, they weren't actually in the same HR reporting structure. That was very impactful and helpful. And obviously the number 5 principle extreme ownership talks about is prioritize and execute. This is around keeping calm with the team, even during dynamic situations that are very fast moving, very challenging, very, stressful. You get senior executives, the regulators. I remember I was in a room with the head regulators, and they were very upset. They were putting a lot of pressure on me. My team was witnessing it. They kept saying, "Why aren't you moving faster? Why can't you deliver this?" And I realized I needed to inject some humor, so I had to be calm. And I wanted to explain how we're trying to prioritize this work through Scrum, through like backlog refinement, the sprint planning, the backlog, the sprint backlog, the product backlog work, trying to explain the framework of Scrum. But I knew I had to inject some humor to help bring the situation down to a manageable level so they could comprehend what I was going to say next. So I would joke them and say, "You want us to go faster? Have you not seen our logo? We're a 6 horsepower company, and we just got rid of some 3 horses. We're a 3 horsepower company now. So we're trying to work with Elon to slap some Falcon rockets on our stagecoach, but we're having trouble integrating those. So if you can trust me and have some patience, I'm going to explain to you how we're going to try to accomplish that so we can move faster." And that would quickly they started laughing, and it brought the tone of the room down. And now I can now start introducing to them how we're going to use Scrum and a process control framework to allow them as regulators to inspect early and more often versus what they're used to, which is typical waterfall approach, which is we'll wait 2-3 years later, come back and find out nothing was done the way they wanted it done. So that helped out a lot by keeping calm, prioritizing, executing that work, and being transparent with them and showing them how Scrum was going to work, and constantly trying to add a little bit of humor. I was trying to work on my side job because I really got fired and go do stand-up comedian type of work. But the jokes, I think some of them fell flat, but others worked pretty good. So I'm still working on that. So, but the other thing was, prioritize and execute, extreme ownership talks about is situational awareness they talk about, right? Up and down the management structure. In the military, they call it chain of command. Obviously, it's your organizational structure, leadership. So passing on that situational awareness to my leaders and not being afraid to do that. So having that courage to call my executives directly, send emails. I remember, I sent an email to the CTO because my Scrum approach was still very abrasive, very disruptive, very counter to policies that the company was approving at the time around waterfall project mentality work. So this new CTO was very adamant about implementing Scrum and Agile. So I just wanted to let them know, like, hey, this is what I'm doing. I'm a pocket in your organization, outside of your organization, but in our organization, does this align? Does this framework and model and my approach align to your vision? Because I want to support you, boss, leader, with your approach as well. But does this align? And it did. So he replied back, and I was, very appreciative of me reaching out, and but that's several levels up for me, right? And so that took a lot of courage and to do that, right? So I had to, make sure I, showed him how we were prioritizing and executing on his vision and how our work aligned to his to help support him. So that was very helpful around passing that situation awareness up and down, and then passing that back down to my team, saying, look, we're aligned to the senior boss and what his vision is as well. So that helped out, and that's how that prioritize and execute principle linked very well to how we were rolling out Scrum for our team. The sixth one is decentralized command. This was probably one of the most challenging ones today, still to this day, we're dealing with. And this is obviously Les talks about this, Les huge around descaling the current organization. Obviously, to be an effective leader, you can't manage, hundreds of people. You can't manage hundreds of teams. But the one thing I started realizing very quickly was other folks that were trying to implement Scrum Agile, they wanted to, what I call, dilute the product owner role, right? This is where the product owner was just basically a task manager or a task master, an admin of the team, a project manager that turned product owner, a member of the development team, just self-anointing them as the product owner as well. And it was just a very microcosm, a micro kind of experiment team, not really supporting what they truly thought was the product, what they owned. So, trying to descale that organization by decentralizing that command and control structure, which talks about breaking down management teams, going away from local optimized component team structures, going away from you're a UAT team, you're an API team, you're a microservice team, you're a database team, you're a .NET, web front end only team, and figuring out a way to break that down. And that again took a lot of trust, working with those managers that in technology were very used to dictating and delegating tasks to their engineering teams versus relinquishing that command and control structure and becoming more people managers. And obviously, we try to explain to them that in Scrum, whether it's the Nexus or less, whatever scaling framework you want to apply on top of Scrum framework, there's not that many roles, right? Officially, it's product owner, Scrum Master, and the developers, right? That's it. So if you're not one of those three roles, then how are you going to support those roles? And you need to, have trust in this team to relinquish that, that empowerment that you used to have over the team, and be informed now, right? And come and look and observe and inspect how your team is supporting this broader, bigger mission called the product, right? From a business perspective. So that was huge to help, and that's going to be continually be a challenge for me personally, is how to continue to reinforce that decentralized command and control structure in a very large, complex organization. So that's hopefully over time leaders will come in and see and trust that this is this works, and that decentralized command is going to be so important as a key pillar to support this, because like I said, a leader can't effectively manage thousands of people individually, right? They have to trust in what I call the product owner, right, which is the leader, right? The key roles in Scrum are considered leaders, like Scrum Master and the product owner. So that's a big one that's really resonated with me, and when I listened to that and read about that decentralized command approach that Extreme Ownership talks about. The seventh one is around cover and move. This is focused more around how to support your team and how to actually deploy an environment like what the retrospective calls out, right? This is how do you identify quickly an issue and then cover your team and then move on and pivot quickly. So obviously the sprint planning activity event helps out with that. The sprint retrospective helps out with that. Being transparent in the product backlog and the sprint backlog helps that, because when you have outside influences come in and you have no control over it, whether it's from your executives or regulators, whoever, stakeholders, that's a constant battle daily, right? Especially when you transparently provide your product backlog to thousands or tens of thousands of people in your organization, psychologically and subconsciously, people realize what happens is they all think that that Scrum team is their personal development team, their personal data analytics team, their personal report team, their personal testing team. So being able to shield and cover your team and then pivoting and moving quickly, and embracing that teamwork construct, where you've got to allow that team to work with each other and trust each other, to support each other, building that camaraderie, that team camaraderie. That's a key principle that the extreme ownership framework talks about, and how it applied, I think, to the Scrum framework. The other one is plan. This is around obviously the product goal, right? With your Scrum team, what that's the mission, the sprint goal, more incrementally, right? For your time box of 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 weeks. It's got to be clear and concise, and so that it's got to depict your mission, your vision as a product owner, what your goal is. And that's one thing I realized that I was challenged with early on, was I wasn't being clear. I wasn't checking in with the team. I was just lobbing this goal over the wall, the virtual wall, to the team, and then checking out for the whole sprint. And a lot of times the folks, the developers, the contractors, the engineers, the non-development, non-technology people on the Scrum team, they didn't really understand what was the mission. What are we trying to do? Right? They weren't all on the same page, I realized. And also the key subject matter experts, domain experts on my Scrum team, they didn't feel like their inputs were getting listened to or being, accepted and comprehended from me as their product owner. So I had to make sure that I, provided a clear, concise plan of, what we needed, whether that even for a sprint goal, helping to make sure they were focused on what the sprint goal is and what our product goal is. So not micromanaging the team, helping to generate and support those innovative ideas. A lot of times, once I implemented this principle specifically, I would, take the time and do my own prototyping, wireframe, use the tools to come back to the team and say, I know I wrote this down, but I'm not George R. R. Martin or Stephen King, so it's terrible. I'm still struggling at conveying my thoughts and ideas down to written form that conveys the same approach of what I'm talking about or thinking about. So let me do some more visualization. Let me take some time to wireframe this. So I showed them I've got skin in this game too. And that was helpful to supporting what that clear and concise plan was for that particular item in the backlog for that sprint goal, or when they brought that into a future sprint. So that helped encourage the team to ask clarifying questions, and it helps generated that team camaraderie, that feedback, that environment of making sure that they're comfortable to raise issues. A lot of times a team would say, yeah, Chris, that's great, man, but you're literally breaking laws of physics. There's no way to do that. And so I had to go back and check my ego and go, I got to trust these team that they're telling me the truth, and I believe in them. And so I got to then pivot my own approach and figure out a different way to rewrite this plan, because it was too convoluted or too complex, and I need to take the time to break it down. So that's kind of what the plan principle and extreme ownership talks about. And the second to last one, leading up and down the chain of command. This is around what I tell people when you're deploying Scrum, and Richard first taught me about this about 10 years ago. Doing this in a complex organization and working with a lot of people, it's hard. But HARD stands for something. It's an acronym, right? HARD is about being honest with yourself first, and then being honest with other people, and hopefully they're honest, reciprocating that to you, because they see hopefully you come with good intent. You have hopefully high integrity and morals and ethics and standards, and so hopefully they respect that. And they come back and they're honest with you when they tell you about whether something's going to work or not. And that's what you really need to deploy in your team, because you want the team to be honest with you and tell you whether or not they can do this or not. So that was the first principle of the breaking out of HARD. I would focus on people, and myself was being honest. The next one's accountability. This, the extreme ownership talks all about this. As a leader, I had to hold myself accountable and tell the team I was accountable. There was a situation that happened where we had a very significant bad deployment. It was one of the very few that we had, and it was I started seeing very early on people were pointing fingers. I'm sure you guys have seen this, blaming each other. It was this tech team, it was this business team, it was this reporting team, data team, whatever. And I just said, no, I'm the one I'm the one at fault. I own this. I'm accountable as the product owner of this team. I laid out the reasons how I think what I should have done to prevent this from happening, this failure, but I embraced and showed them, because I'm holding myself accountable, let's learn from this failure and let's build a mission and a plan to hopefully we don't repeat that. And so that helped quickly break down that finger pointing, lack of accountability, to where now I started seeing the team themselves taking extreme ownership and hold themselves accountable more frequently first, versus quickly just lobbing that blame over to somebody else over the wall. So that's around just supporting, asking yourself daily, like, are they informing me as their leader, right? Do they feel like, this is plain English, no translation needed for what we're trying to work on? Same with my leaders, right? So I would make sure that I'm doing the same up to my bosses and challenging them when they come with a very obscure, direction or mission that they want us to accomplish. So, and the next one is respect.
Hey, Chris, quick, just want to,
Sure.
we got about 10, I'll stretch to 15 minutes. So in case you want to take some questions, back to you.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'll be quick. So, anyway, so respect and direct, those are the last two for hard, and that supports openness. And then obviously the last one is decisiveness and uncertainty. The link there for Scrum is around courage, trust, respect. Be proactive, right? Leaders, they got to make the best decision they can based on the information they have available to them. So I let the team know that, hey, I only have so much information available to me at the time. I'm trying to act quickly and be decisive, but don't worry if you guys feel like it's not the right one, because if it does go sideways, like I said earlier, I'm going to hold myself accountable for that. Anyway, so I'll leave this last slide up right here. This is on the dichotomy of leadership that the extreme ownership talks about. And this is something I constantly refer back to almost daily. And I try to, preach this to other leaders that I work with, as a standard to hopefully hold themselves at as they're leading their teams, and what I'm trying to do for myself first. So anyway, so I'll pause there. I know there's a lot of content I was trying to get through quickly for you guys. Hopefully it made sense, did some linkages, and I'll take a breath now and see what questions you guys have and have a little dialogue.
Thanks for that.
And I can stay late too. I can stay a little longer too if we need to, Gene. So,
folks, any questions you would like to throw at Chris? Be good. Sonny, go ahead.
How you doing? Yeah, thanks a lot. Excellent presentation. Thank you so much. Really sort of underscores a lot of my own personal investment in in less in Scrum. I'm mostly a Scrum Master for Kanban teams, but it translates. Question: you talked about you in many cases found a bit of a conflicting dynamic where you are the actual solid line manager of somebody on the team, when teams have no leader. Teams have no hierarchy. So what do you do? What do you do when you're having an issue with somebody on the team who is sort of acting out or not being as how shall I say, team oriented? How do you deal with that in the team context? And if the need is for you to, in a solid line, sort of command and control way, take actions, how do you deal with the ramifications of that?
Great question, Sonny. A lot of times it obviously depends on the situation and the person, both personal, psychological, physical, whatever it might be. I'll give you one quick story example. We had a developer who was an absolutely brilliant individual. This guy was just, I couldn't even come to tell you how smart this individual was with his software development skills, but he was very abrasive, very disrespectful to a lot of folks on the Scrum team, and it was causing a lot of problems. I had a lot of folks on my team that had a lot of patience, and I thought a little thick skin, and I started seeing them having an issue with them and coming to me. I was like, this is a problem. I got to figure this out. And what I did was first I tried to, try to learn more about that individual. Maybe I wasn't challenging them enough. Maybe I wasn't providing that environment for them to be more open and be more respectful. So first I had to learn about this person. So I had more interactions with them. Obviously you can't do that with everybody, but when situations like this happen, you have to invest the time as a leader to start learning more about this individual. And I quickly realized, he was very, open with me and let me know, like, he has a medical condition. It was Asperger's. And I had no idea what Asperger's was. So I did, in my team, Josh, this guy, a friend of mine, Josh, he did his own research and he came back and he told me, he's like, dude, this is what this means when someone has this medical condition, and he doesn't have control over how he's acting to these people. And I realized, I'm like, oh, okay. So we started doing research, and he helped as well significantly. This member of our Scrum team, he was proactive and took the initiative to go learn more about ways to help work with people with that condition. And we figured out a way to make the environment better for him, so it wouldn't trigger his reaction and those responses. And we trained the others and was open to other folks on the team if he was, and he was very comfortable. He was like, yeah, I'm very open. I don't care if anybody knows I have this condition. So great, because we want to support you, right? And that helps tremendously. Like, there's now a lot of those folks that were very, very, I think taken back or offended initially by his statements. They're still friends with him to this day. They still communicate, talk to him almost daily, even years later, and they're not even on the same team anymore. So that's one example. But it's a lot of times, you have to look at it and realize that some of the times Scrum is very difficult for folks, and you have to have patience, and you have to figure out a way to have the team come together and work with that person. You can't just be the manager come down and say authoritatively, you got to be get on this way. I try to support the team to come together, to work together as a team to help solve that problem when one or two people have a personality issue or conflict. And then that last result is support the teams voting that person off the team, right? Self-organize the problem out. If that person really can't get unstuck, they can't figure out a way to change things about themselves to support this, the thing called Scrum, and they don't believe in these values, they're not supporting these values, and that's where either the team tries to help them off the team, or I step in as the boss or leader and say, hey, it looks like this is going to be too challenging for you. I've got something that's not related to Scrum or Agile that maybe I could have you go work on, and challenge them that way. And sometimes in those occasions, I've had people come back and take the training and come back to it years later, even software developers. I got some that are on our teams today that 10 years ago did this. I ain't gonna work here. It can't happen. It's impossible. And they wouldn't participate. Well, guess what? They're some of the best Scrum teams that we have on the team right now. So sometimes it just takes patience, Sonny. So
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yep, good question.
Thank you, Sonny, and thank you, Chris. Chris, there's another few questions. So let's
Sure.
start with Pete. Pete Bailey is yeah, let's time box it for a few minutes. Yep.
Sure.
Hey, first of all, thanks for taking the time. Quickly, the idea that managers are optional in this. So that's something that we struggle with on a regular basis. We love our command and control. So did you make that statement explicitly, or have you kind of done an end around to kind of get that idea out there? And then what was the result? Did you get behavior changes in managers, or were there org structure changes?
Great question. Quickly, what I did was, it would be a subtle, subconscious way of deploying that approach with these leaders and managers. And one thing I would do is I'd come back to in this case, an engineering manager or technology manager who was very command and controlled over that team. I would say, so you own the business risk then for this product. So when it goes sideways, you're going to stand up in front of the regulators and take ownership of when this thing went sideways and why it failed. Well, no. We don't own the business risk. The business owns that. Okay, well then I need you to trust in this, and I'm going to help you with this, but I'm going to work with you closer. I need you to relinquish some of this just a little bit. Do an experiment with that. I'm not saying your whole team. Let's take 3 or 4 of your key folks, have them go work directly with the product owner. They take direction from each other, but you're going to be invited to all the Scrum events. So don't feel like you're not. So once I did that, over the course of, it literally took a couple of years, that started getting that person on board, because also I would have my leaders give that manager a lot of fanfare, a lot of formal recognition with their peers and their leaders. And then it started quickly becoming contagious. His peers were like, why is he getting all the fanfare and recognition? What are they doing differently? And then once they realized they need to turn into more people managers versus command and control managers, then they started supporting and asking, hey, can I come to your next Scrum training? Can I go to the next product owner or Scrum Master training? Can I learn more about this? And that was that helped quickly, Pete. But again, it did take patience and time to slowly get some of those managers off that old track. So
Thank you.
Good question though.
Thank you for the question. Thank you for the answer. We have Marek. We'll take 2 more questions just because their already hands are up. Marek,
Go ahead, Marek.
do you mind?
Hi, Chris. Thank you for today's presentation. I have a question to you, pretty philosophical, I would say. I'm happy to work for something like 10 years in an organization which mindset of extreme ownership. I mean, every regular developer or every manager take the whole responsibility. I'm responsibility for everything, like this book says. And to be honest, I've read this book quite recently. I used to be a developer for something like in this company, and for something like 2, I'm a Scrum Master, and I'm constantly being trained as a Scrum Master that as a Scrum Master, I should help the team to find their ways in order to improve. And recently I've read this book and I'm stuck because please imagine, I've just written my question on the chat. Please imagine the situation. The team didn't deliver the sprint goal. The team didn't deliver the sprint goal, and first reaction is team is guilty. Team is responsible for not delivering the sprint goal. False. So maybe managers are guilty. Managers are responsible. It is also false. I, the Scrum Master, I am responsible for not delivering the sprint goal. But on the contrary, I'm not allowed. I'm a Scrum Master. I shouldn't tell the people during the sprint what to do, how to do. I shouldn't help them or make the sprint goal being delivered for them. I should somehow facilitate, and maybe I should work in the long perspective so that they will start eventually one day to deliver the sprint goal. But I'm responsible for not delivering the sprint goal the very today and probably next sprint. How do you live with this? Or maybe this mindset, I'm responsible, I am a Scrum Master, is
Yeah, it was
not
a great
really
question.
here.
Yeah, it's a great question, Mark. I mean, I think I had a similar scenario with my Scrum Master and my product teams where I realized quickly the Scrum Master would come to me and say, "Hey, this isn't working. With this team keeps punting items that they committed to that sprint over and over again, and they're not adhering to that sprint goal." And it's true, you're right. The Scrum Master is treated as the leader of the team, but the ultimate, leader, accountable owner of the product is the product owner, right? Everybody's held accountable for sure, but the product owner needs to take ownership. And so I was trusting the Scrum Master to try to do this and support the team and write the sprint goals with the team. When that wasn't working, I had to step in as a product owner. So maybe one thing you do is lean on your product owner and have those courageous, transparent conversations and say, listen, this isn't working. I've tried these various scenarios and I can't get the team to commit on the sprint goal. And what I found out very quickly is that in this case, and my scenario is probably different than yours, but the sprint goal was getting really, really big, right? It was getting too big and it was supporting the team over committing and under delivering. So I had to step in as a product owner and say, hey folks, let's try working on a very simple, concise plan for the next 3 weeks. So it was our time box for our sprint. And we only brought in, 2 items, like 2 major, high level things to focus on. So it gave them more flexibility and room without having to context switch, because I realized context switching was happening very quickly. The team wasn't really working together, in the self-organizing way. They just went off to their virtual corners and didn't communicate and talk to each other. So that was one thing I had to do was step in as a product owner. So maybe lean on your product owner and not try to take all the ownership yourself, right? Because you're the leader of the team. You should be there helping engage the team and training the team and helping them improve. But the ultimate accountable owner of the team is the product owner, right? From my perspective, right? So maybe try that.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marek. Thank you, Chris. So let's take one more before we wrap, just because people started dropping.
Hey, Karen.
Karen, if you don't mind being time boxing.
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Nice. Okay, so Chris, thank you so much. And you said that the Scrum framework is only 10 pages long, yet it's extremely difficult to implement because of the nature of people. You had that great example of the person with Asperger's who was open, right, to sharing what his issues were. But, what are some key challenges in addition to the ones that you've shared? And what do you do when someone isn't at that point of, being open and is more protective of their, kind of a not so great ego or too good of an ego?
Yeah, a lot of times it's a great question, Karen. A lot of times it's just investment in time, right, with that person, right? So especially if it's a key person on the team that people depend on and need to accomplish the goal of that sprint, each and every sprint, I would then have to make sure I took the time as the leader of the team, the product owner, to work with them closer, right? And a lot of times it was just professional training. They haven't trained a lot. So in the military, we have a saying, bleed in training, sweat in wartime. And so I would make sure I deployed and took the time to show them that, hey, I'm going to go get some good training set up for you. I'm going to go work to get you exposed to this, because that seemed to be a constant theme, was what was really the root of the problem. What was, we were just assuming they will figure this out, self-organize. They'll go, try to do their own training. Like you said, read the Scrum Guide 15 times and watch some YouTube videos, click through some other PowerPoints that were shared on LinkedIn, and I should just assume that they're going to become experts out of this very quickly. That wasn't the case. So I had to make sure I deployed a reoccurring professional training regimen for one, and remind them that in this one case, this other person we had they were afraid that they were going to be the ones blamed, because they had PTSD, being in technology, being blamed all the time on prior projects, not product teams, waterfall, not agile, Scrum. So I found out that they were just beaten down. They're at a point psychologically that they were afraid to just jump in and take more risk, because they were just afraid they're going to continue to be blamed for the problem. And once I worked with them and said, no, I'm going to take ownership of this. If it goes sideways, I'm going to go in front of the leaders and say, it's my fault. This is why this happened. I'm the accountable leader. I'm going to make sure I shield you from that. I just need you to be open and trust me, and I can trust you to be flexible and go on this journey with me. Would you do that? Would you want to do that with me? Because that's the standards I'm trying to set here. And that's the type of people I need on this team. That's why we treated the team like a jazz band. I'm not going to critique you because you don't know how to play horns. You're a great guitarist. I need a guitarist on this jazz band, right? So once we had that environment, they realized, but it took time though, right? As an investment with people to work with them almost daily sometimes, right? And that's, Karen, what helped me in that one scenario. Hope that answered your question. So.
Yes, it did. The voice of a great leader. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Karen. And Chris, huge thanks to you. I would like to, people started dropping, so I would like to time box this and wrap this up. Before I do, before we finish, I really wanted to express my personal gratitude, my big thanks to you for coming out on this. At least for me, it's a very snowy day, but others may or may not. But certainly, you got things to do, I'm sure, on Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon. Thanks for being here, doing this for us. It's a very good talk, I think, and I think your candor and your honesty and transparency and your candidness on this, I really, really appreciate and recognize. So thank you for doing this.
I'm humbled by that. Thank you, everybody. And sorry we went over a little bit, but I'm open to any more conversations. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. My contact goes there. I'm very passionate about this stuff, so I might not have all the answers, but might help network you with somebody else that's probably way smarter than me at the problem that you're having. But at the end of the day, I just love this stuff so much, and I really appreciate you guys taking the time on your Saturday away from your friends and family to listen to me ramble off about my own challenges and failures of implementing Scrum at a very complex organization. So thank you again for the time and the opportunity, and Gene, appreciate you giving me the platform. So.
And one more thing. So I think I already shared a few times. There was a dedicated blog link where we're going to upload your recording, as well as, if you don't mind, just 4 pages, send them to me, either PDF or PowerPoint. I'll turn it into PDF. I'll upload it along with your personal information and contact information so people can reach out to you directly. Okay.
Great. Absolutely. Yep.
All right. Well, folks, thank you very much for joining. Be well, stay safe. Be healthy.
Yep.
And have a great weekend.
And try to laugh more, folks. At the end of the day, it's not that big a problem. So, try to laugh more, put it in perspective. And more likely, if you fail, your company will probably still trade if it's publicly traded. Your company will probably still open doors the next day. So try to put it in perspective and don't take things too seriously, and try to laugh more. So, all right, folks.
Thank you very much.
Sure. Thanks, everybody.
Cheers. Bye.